Yo, we got the sleeping Wo-Chien out here. Anyways, so this is going to be the video where I talk about the team that I use in Pokémon World Championships, and in day 2, right? So this is like the serious competition, playing versus like super good players, and it's going to be a video kind of just going over all that, and I don't know if I'd necessarily call it a celebration because I would have liked to do a bit better, but it was still pretty good, right? I ended up getting top cut, so it's not the worst ever. But yeah, basically I'm just going to be going over the team, like how I got it all and everything. So you guys might be like, okay, Joe, like why the heck did you bring Wo-Chien to the World Championships? Now you might be like, you know, you're crazy, like maybe you're throwing like whatever. But I assure you, I am not throwing as hard as you thought I was, right? Wo-Chien was actually pretty sick for this tournament, and I ended up coming to that conclusion pretty late, right? Like, I didn't immediately just go like, okay, yeah, like, I'm bringing Wo-Chien to this tournament, like, it's good. Like, I had to convince myself, right? So, basically, the way this team started was, it started out with actually the Thundurus and the Landorus core with Flutter Mane, right? So, the main idea with the team was I would basically lead the Thundurus and Flutter Mane a lot, right? Essentially, what I could do is I could just go for a Thunder Wave and a Hex immediately, do a bunch of nuke damage to stuff, and put on a ton of pressure, right? And then as well, I'd have moves like Eerie Impulse and other disruptive moves to kind of support my other attackers. So Landorus also helped with that because it gave me another pivot that had really good bulk, right? When you switch it in with Intimidate, had the Assault Vest that you could use as a good switch, and it had like a lot of good tools you could take advantage of, right? Now, the Landorus wasn't always Assault Vest. It was actually Lumberry at first because I was using Rillaboom over Wo-Chien on this team, right? But once I had that 3-mon core, I'd kind of built out into Urshifu and Heatran because Urshifu and Heatran just offered a lot of natural synergy onto the team, right? If you look at Thundurus and you look at Landorus' weaknesses, which is ice moves, Heatran and Urshifu work really naturally well with that. If you look at Urshifu's weaknesses, which is going to be fairy moves, right? Heatran works incredibly well with that. You have Eerie Impulse as well because most fairy moves are coming from Flutter, right? And you have Intimidate from Landorus. And then also too, Urshifu's main weaknesses, right? Grass, Landorus can switch in, or not Landorus, sorry. Thundurus and Heatran can switch into it. If you think about electric moves, Landorus can switch into it. So it's just a lot of good synergy, right? Now, I had Rillaboom before because I thought Rillaboom was actually like pretty fine on this team. What Rillaboom allowed me to do was essentially just give me a nice pivot and terrain change, right? So I could change away Psychic Terrain and I could switch in Rillaboom to, you know, just really disrupt with Fake Out and you cycle with your turn, right? Now, Rillaboom presented some issues that I didn't exactly fully like, and the main problem with Rillaboom is it felt really niche and really awkward. I felt like I wasn't bringing the 6th slot enough, and I felt like that I could find something better than the Rillaboom that would maybe allow me to like do a bit more, right? So I set on this long quest. By set on long quest, I mean I procrastinated until like 2 days before the tournament, 3 days before the tournament, got on rank battles, and I was like, haha, let me throw a Wo-Chien on here and see how it does. Dude, when I put Wo-Chien on this team, it was absolutely incredible for this team. Now, I'm going to explain the theory behind Wo-Chien before you're like, okay, Joe, like now you're just capping, right? Like you just put it on and like it was good. Okay, so basically I was like, okay, Rillaboom doesn't feel good because I can't bring it into a lot of matchups, right? So what matchups am I having trouble with that I like don't like Rillaboom because of, right? Rillaboom didn't give me anything else to deal with like Tornadus and Urshifu Water. Like, so for example, right, like what I would do is I would like to lead something like Flutter or like Landorus next to Thundurus, and I would Terra Water Wild Bolt turn 1, right? Now, there's a couple problems with this. One, you're committing your Terra immediately to survive the Surging Strikes from Urshifu, right? And then also, two, you're making yourself neutral to, you know, opposing Tornadus, so it's not always the best, and you can make yourself weak to opposing Gorilla in the back. So what I needed to do was give myself a way to beat Tornadus Urshifu without necessarily always having to burn my Terra Water on the Thundurus immediately, right? So I was like, okay, so how can I reduce Urshifu's damage into me while also getting the Rocky Helmet benefit? Because I really liked Rocky Helmet and I really wanted the benefit of Rocky Helmet. So I was like, oh, Tablets of Ruin, Wo-Chien. Guess what can also switch into Urshifu? If you lead Flutter and you lead Wo-Chien, or sorry, if you lead Flutter and you lead Thundurus, or you lead Thundurus and you lead Landorus, if you switch in Wo-Chien turn 1, they could read you, sure, right? They could throw a close combat out. You're still wild bolting them and getting 2 KOs or getting a ton of damage, and like you're okay losing Wo-Chien, right? More likely they're throwing a Surging Strikes into your Thundurus or into your partner slot, which is going to be the Landorus of Flutter at the time. And if you switch in Wo-Chien, Wo-Chien's taking nothing from that, and you're just getting a Wild Bolt in return. So incredibly good line, and kind of started building out the idea of Wo-Chien. Another matchup that I was having trouble with, Armarosion Didi. I had to play a lot of mind games with my Rillaboom, switching it in and out. What hard bodies Armarosion Didi? I just leave Wo-Chien and Heatran, and I just click Substitute and Snarl. What do you do into me? If you have Wide Guard, you have to click Wide Guard and do absolutely nothing, and then you have to play a mind game between clicking Expanding and doing like 0 to my Heatran, right? Behind sub, no less. Or trying to hit my Wo-Chien, which can just protect and stall turns, right? So there were just so many like good options that like Wo-Chien allowed my team. And then you might be like, okay, Joe, only 2 matchups, like that's it? No, Iron Hands, Ursaluna, and Cresselia. How does that beat Wo-Chien and Landorus? It doesn't, because you just cycle like crazy. And then you might be like, okay, Joe, so like you've given me some points. Have you convinced me about the Wo-Chien? Okay, so basically, right? I was like, okay, so this is all good. Like, it sounds really good, right? But, like, what other matchups am I struggling with that Wo-Chien would even, like, fix? Rain, Basculegion. I have to rely on Thunder Waves before I had this change, right? Boom. Wo-Chien, another great option, even just for Rain teams in general, right? Because you could just leave it in front. Then I was like, okay, so, like, what other matchups could be annoying? I think I mentioned Dozo, but if I didn't mention Dozo, Wo-Chien's incredible into that as well, because you just hard body Dozo. Like, they have nothing to beat your Wo-Chien unless they're Terra Flying. But then if they're Terra Flying, they just die to your Thundurus, or they just die to one of your other Pokemon, right? And then finally, I was like, okay, so like I'm pretty convinced, right? But I had a Dark Urge problem, and I was like, dude, Wo-Chien fixes that. But they didn't only fix it, right? Like I needed more than just Wo-Chien to fix that problem as well. So what ended up helping with the Wo-Chien was then I also changed my Heatran Terra, because I didn't need Terra Grass because I had a natural grass type basically in Wo-Chien, right? So I actually ended up making Heatran Terra Fairy because of that. So now you might be like, okay, so like that all sounds good, right? And like, you know, you added Wo-Chien for that reason, right? So it was pretty good, right? I'm going up here, by the way, so the other mons don't like attack me or whatever. But basically you might be like, okay, Joe, so that sounds pretty good, right? You gave a lot of good valid reasons why Wo-Chien. Now, like, why, you know, like, why do you want to use this team that needs Wo-Chien to be good? So I'll tell you why. So, like, this team in general just felt like it was the most comfortable for me, and although it's a bit of a grindy team, the extra bulk really does allow you to kind of, like, outplay your opponents if you play well, right? So I found that these kind of teams are very good in situations like Worlds, because if you're thinking about the World Championships, right, like, you want to avoid as much volatile stuff as possible, or at least, like, volatile stuff to the point where you win and lose off of a move connect, right? So the way this team was designed is, even though I had risky moves in terms of Wild Bolt, Thunder Wave, Rock Slide, Heat Wave that could miss, basically I gave myself enough opportunities to be able to land it because of stuff like Tablets of Ruin, Intimidate, Eerie Impulse, right? Even my own opposing Thunder Wave, defensive Terras, defensive switches, right? Like, there are just a lot of tools to help make your team last longer, and that allows you to fire off the more risky moves that you're choosing to run on this team, right? So Wo-Chien actively helped with that, like, even micro decisions pretty much with the team, right? It was just like a nice glue to the team and like a good consistent option, right? So now you might be like, okay, so that's like a lot of good things, right? But where do you go from there, right? And another thing too, before I get too off track, Dark Urshifu was partially fixed by Wo-Chien, but then also, because of the Wo-Chien being a grass type and me having a natural grass type as a switch into a Moongus, I changed my Heatran to Terra Fairy, which ended up being not only a big deal for Dark Urshifu, it also made my Chi-Yu matchup so good. Because when they lead Chi-Yu Flutter into you, and you launch like a Thunder Wave or an Eerie Impulse into the Flutter, and you just like Terra Fairy your Heatran eventually, after the Flutter is like gone, what do they do to your Heatran with Chi-Yu? They can't even touch you. They go for a Fire move, they boost you. They go for a Dark Pulse, they can't do anything to you, right? So it's just incredibly good. But yeah, so anyways, that's kind of how I settled on the final version of the team, right? I just basically had like a 6 I really liked, and I really found like the way I wanted to, you know, what I wanted to run at Worlds, right? So now I have the team, right? Now let's go over the sets a little bit, and then I'll kind of talk about like how I ended up getting all the Pokemon and like what steps went into obviously the rest of it, right? So first off, Wo-Chien. So how did I decide on the Wo-Chien set to use? So one thing I didn't want Wo-Chien to be, which I found was an issue with other Wo-Chien teams, which is why this mon has never found success, is it just sits there and does absolutely nothing. I mean nothing, right? You're like, oh, this Mon is trash because it just sits there and clicks Leech Seed as the opponent switches 4 times and then it loses. So I was like, I'm not even going to run Leech Seed. And I'm also not going to run Pollen Puff because I don't want a dead move slot. So I ended up running Foul Play, Giga Drain, Snarl, Protect. Now you might be like, okay, Joe, you're crazy. Why would you do that? Now, basically, Giga Drain allows you to pressure Urshifu and pressure water types in general. It also pressures Amoonguss once a Terra Waters in front of you, which isn't super uncommon because you have a Heatran, right? Snarl allows you to weaken slower teams and also gives you an Indeedee Armorage matchup. That's part of the reason why I wanted to drop Pollen Puff and Leech Seed. And then Foul Play was the final, like, kind of best option on the team. If you think about it, right, there are random Pokemon that can give this team trouble. Bramblegast is one of them. Foul Play helps deal with that. Other physical attackers that are just annoying for the team to deal with that you just want safe, like, pins into, right? Foul Play, you can just launch into a slot and do a bunch of damage. Ursaluna with Swords Dance, yeah, normally you'd have to worry about it with Wo-Chien because all you'd be doing is clicking Leech Seed. If I Foul Play you as use Swords Dance, you get absolutely bodied. Now, you might be like, because I saw this, Aaron did a video with this team where he played the team on ladder, and he was kind of going through the team and, you know, obviously talking through it. I saw some comments being like, but Joe, doesn't Tablets of Ruin reduce, you know, attacks, so your foul plays are doing less? Foul play ignores those. So you're essentially doing so much damage with foul play into these strong physical attackers, even though you're lowering their attack. It's like the most broken thing ever. So yeah, I've just felt incredibly good. I ended up focusing more on the defense of Wo-Chien. I wanted to make it live 2 close combats from Urshifu. Because you have Citrus Berry, right, with Intimidate active, right? So that was incredibly important, and the Wo-Chien was super great. I mean, I was really happy with it. The Poison Terror just allowed it to sit in front of Fairy-type moves from Flutter Mane, and it actually let me endgame Eric Rios in a game 3. I was able to win with the Wo-Chien in, like, a really tight endgame situation. So Wo-Chien did its job. I really liked it, and it came to a lot of matchups, right? Then we have the Urshifu. So the Urshifu was super bulked out of its mind. Like, this Mon had so much bulk invested in it. I think I gave it near max special defense and, like, a lot of HP. And it was mostly just because after Eerie Impulse, this thing took no damage. Chi-Yu, which is normally a Pokemon that does so much damage to Urshifu because obviously, like, Urshifu does have the best special defense. When you're invested this much, it's doing, like, Pebbles to you with Heat Wave. It's still doing, okay, Pebbles is a little bit of an over-exaggeration. It's chunking you, but, like, it's not doing near as much, right? Like, it's a lot more noticeable that you're able to sit in front of attacks. As well, it could take Gleams from, like, not fully invested Specs Flutter, right? So it was a really good Urshifu. I found it incredibly useful, right? The only drawback of the bulk, you could argue, is the speed, but I have Thunder Wave on the team, right? And I also have a lot of tools like Intimidate and everything else to, like, help reduce the damage that opponents are doing, along with Eerie Impulse. So it's just really hard for opponents to even get, like, a really good footing in terms of, like, being able to damage the Urshifu or outspeed it in situations where they want to, right? So I just felt like the Urshifu was incredibly good. I really liked how it played on the team, and it just allowed me to really just exert that consistent pressure. And then Thundurus was also Terra Water. So Thundurus was Terra Water because if you think about the most common moves going into Thundurus, it's going to be Surging Strikes, it's going to be Ice moves, right? Water moves or Water Terra type just completely invalidates those and is able to sit in front of it. And what is Water weak to? Rillaboom. I have a Wo-Chien, I have a Heatran, I have a Thundurus with its normal type being flying. I have so many resists to this thing, like, I'm not really concerned about it, right? Also weak to electric moves, but then I have a Landorus and a Wo-Chien as well, right? So I just had a lot of counterplay into those kind of teams, so I wasn't particularly worried about it. Now, Thundurus was using Wild Bolt, which is an inherently risky move, but I kind of mentioned the theory behind that, is if you have enough bulk to be able to throw the move out multiple times, it's not as risky because you're just able to sit there and, like, even if you miss a couple times, you're fine. In my match versus Kango Harada, which I might actually go over in this video, you actually will notice that, like, even though I'm missing a ton of Wild Bolts, like, I had to pray eventually to, like, land one because I was, like, missing a ton, but you have to kind of, like, think, like, okay, I am throwing out, like, so many Wild Bolts, like, the ones that I need to connect are going to connect most likely, right? Taunt was also just a good option to shut down Amoonguss, right? So then, Landorus. So the Landorus is pretty bulky on this team, kind of the trend of the team, right? I just wanted to make the team, like, very, very bulky because I felt like having the team being able to sustain hits was really important, as I mentioned. Landorus was no exception. So Landorus was running the Assault Vest. It could really just switch into hits. And then you have the Tablets of Ruin, obviously, plus Intimidate to really slow down opposing physical attackers. It was just really nice to have so many ways to reduce damage. And Landorus being a really powerful pivot with U-turn was just super nice on the team. And it also just worked really well. I like how Wo-Chien just came over to, like, give me a hug or something. I'm like, oh my god, I'm, like, in the Wo-Chien. But yeah, Landorus was just like a really useful tool. Terraflying Terra Blast was great for putting on pressure. There were just so many cool things you could do with it, right? So I really enjoyed, you know, utilizing the Landorus on this team, and I felt like it was really useful for what I had to do. I wasn't too worried about speed. A slow U-turn pivot's kind of nice, especially on a slow team like this. And then if you throw a Thunder Wave, you're outspeeding pretty much everything you need to, right? So then, after that, right, we have the Flutter Mane. The Flutter Mane, I ended up running a faster spread than I ran on my Jump Love team. And the main reasoning for that was just because I wanted the Flutter to be able to outpace, like, other modest Flutters, which did end up coming into play, like, in tournament, and I felt like it was incredibly useful. And then also, too, you know, obviously when you're throwing out Hexes, like, you already have such a power boost from, like, Thunder Wave. So it's like, why not just capitalize on that by just having more speed, right? I had a little bit less bulk, but, like, it wasn't really noticeable. I felt like the bulk that I had was very reasonable for what I was trying to do with the Flutter. It actually had a clutch survival on the stream game as well, so it was pretty nice, right? I have no complaints about the Flutter. Just 2 double stabs, right? So you have your 2 fairy coverage in Moonblast Dazzling Gleam, and then you have Shadow Ball Hex. Nothing too complicated, but I feel like Flutter was the mon that didn't really have to be. And then finally Heatran, right? So Heatran was incredibly strong because its typing really synergized with a lot of the other partners. Flash Fire gave me a strong Chi-Yu Flutter matchup, right, with the original typing. And then on top of that, Lefties just for the residual recovery combined with all the sustain on the team was really nice. And then also, too, you're benefiting off of opposing Rillaboom's grassy terrain, which is actually very common, right? So, in general, right, like, the moveset of Heat Wave, Earth Power, Substitute, Protect is just the best moveset on Heatran. And I found, too, that, like, so, and this is actually something, so, James Evans, another, like, really good player, we were actually talking about Heatran when I was practicing with Terra Grass. And he was like, he's like, literally, if you Terra your Heatran, you lose the Heatran, or you lose the game, even though you win the Heatran mirror. So if you're ever in a position where you have to click Terra Grass, it's kind of bad. So, like, I kind of thought about that more, and I was like, yeah, actually, like, why don't I just use a Terra where it's like, I want to use it in other matchups, and then just, like, not be bad to where, like, I'd need to use the Terra against other Heatran and just play better. Because I have an Eerie Impulse, right? I have Thunder Wave, I have, like, switches, you know, I have a lot of ways to play around it. So, I'm like, I shouldn't have to Terra into Grass to beat it, right? So that's where I ended up going with the Terra Fairy and ended up being like a huge choice, right? Terra Fairy also helped me a lot in the Iron Hands, I forgot to mention. So like that was a really useful like opportunity to take advantage of it. And yeah, like that's how I ended up kind of settling on that Terra, right? So now we kind of have the full completed team, right? And like you can notice a lot of the team kind of centers around the synergies between the Wo-Chien and the Thundurus with the rest of the team, right? And that was kind of nice. Like I liked having that kind of idea with the team where I could just take advantage of that and just kind of like use the team in that way, right? We got Wo-Chien slithering over or whatever, you know, like walking over. Dude, he looks so goofy when he's running around. So funny. Yeah. Oh yeah, he's also like incredibly fun to throw out. Like I don't know why. So like I was playing against Eric Rios in round 2 and like I'm getting a little ahead of myself, right? Because I'm going to talk about like my run and everything. But basically it was really funny because essentially what I did, right, was I sit down versus Eric Rios, right? And I look at his face as he reads the Wo-Chien on team sheet. He's just like he raises his eyebrow in the way you know, like he's like, wait, what? Like, why do you have a Wo-Chien on your team? You know what I mean? So it was really funny. Like, it was just, like, cool to see the reactions, especially to it as well. So now to kind of go into, like, the team. So, like, I got to tell the story of, like, obviously, like, how I got the team and, like, everything, right? Like, because I felt like the way I got it was just, like, such a memorable story. Like, I have to kind of, like, tell you guys about it. So, essentially, right? So, I'm like, okay, I need to... Like, what I need to do, essentially, right, is I need to get all these 6 legendaries. There's 6 legendaries, so they're really hard to get optimized, right? Or even catch them, for a matter of fact, right? So I'm like, I need to get these mons, like, actually kind of quick, right? So I'm like, okay, so we got to start somewhere, right? So obviously I had to ask friends, because there's absolutely no way in any world I would be able to catch all these in like the 2 days before Worlds where I finally settled on a team after like trying out Wo-Chien as like a joke on ladder, right? I didn't try it out as a joke fully on ladder. It was like, it was with that theory, but then it was like, oh yeah, it's actually good, right? So basically like me and a couple friends just sat in a hotel lobby like grinding to get these Pokemon. Like we spent so much time between like Sierra using so many Terra shards for me and my friends to like be able to get all of our Terra types. Thank you, Sierra, by the way. For a couple of like Sierra's friends being able to trade me and other people's friends being able to trade me, like from like Legends Arceus, from like Pokemon Go. It was absolutely like incredible how I was able to get this team. And like it really just shows honestly like Especially too, like with all these legendaries, like having connections is really important, right? Like I have so much thanks for all the people who helped me get these Pokemon, because like without like friends and like people to help me, like there is no way I would have been able to use this team at Worlds, right? Like I would have had to use something a little bit more like obtainable, I guess, before Worlds, because it's like it's so hard with like all these legendaries and like how many games you need. So like I'm incredibly thankful to everyone who helped me get it, right? So basically, right, like we go through the Pokemon individually, right? So the Wo-Chien I ended up getting from Navjeet, right? If you guys don't know, NJ is like one of my best buddies ever in Pokemon. Like he's such a good friend, and like I'm incredibly grateful for him. He helps me with the teams more like in terms of like building them, but like he had a Wo-Chien, and I was like, dude, I was like, can you please get me a 0 IV Wo-Chien, or like can I borrow yours? And he's like, yeah, sure, bro. And I was like, I think I mentioned something about returning. He was like, bro, it's a Wo-Chien. I don't think I'm going to need it anytime soon. I was like, all right, bro. But like, yeah, so he hunted for it, and he managed to get a 0 IV attack one, which was super insane. I think it was like his 6th try or something. I was like, dude, you're like actually cracked. So that was super sick, right? He was obviously able to help me out there, which was super nice. Then the Urshifu I was able to get from one of Sierra's friends, which was super awesome. They got it from their Sword and Shield copy. So that was super nice. I had to obviously mess around with the EVs, reset it, and like use all my resources on that, which was a lot of money. I hope Pokemon makes stuff more accessible, because it actually is really, really hard to like actually train your team if you're making a last minute team decision, right? Which in some situations you want to do before Worlds, right? And then yeah, I was able to get it, which was nice. You know, I had the Mystic Water and everything, and you know the Terra type being water was like super nice as well, because it just made it easier. Then Thundurus. Thundurus came from Pokemon Go. I have to give a big thanks to Daniel. Daniel is an Australian player. He was able to catch the Thundurus in Go, and he had this one was like 19 IV attack or something like that, I think. It had attack in it, which was like fine, because like it was so last minute. I wasn't even like picky about it, right? But like, yeah, he was able to catch it and Go, and he was like, yeah, it's not perfect. I was like, it's totally fine, dude. Like, I just need a Thundurus, right? So I was able to get a Thundurus, which is super nice. And that was like incredibly useful, right? A couple of my other Pokemon also came from like other people helping me out as well, so that was incredibly nice. Then, you know, we had the Landorus. Landorus was Sierra's. I actually asked her, can I name your Landorus Updog? Because I wanted to lead the Double Genie lead and be like, what's Updog? You know what I mean? Because I just think it's funny. And Sierra, you know, was on board, so thank you, Sierra, for allowing me to name your Landorus Updog. That's permanently his name now. But yeah, so that was also from Pokemon Go, which was super nice. There's also Shiny Lando from Pokemon Go, so pretty sick for Sierra. Although she does want this one back, so eventually I'm gonna trade it back to her. And then the Flutter Mane, Pato helped me with this one. He managed to hunt for a 0 IV Flutter. Sierra actually found a 0, or not 0, it was 3 IV Shiny Flutter, and she was like, "Do you want to use it?" I was like, "I can't do my boy, you know, Pato dirty like that after he got like hunted for a 0 IV one for so long." So I was like, I gotta like do that, right? So I ended up using the 0 IV one. It was obviously the correct decision, so foul play does less. And then the Heatran was actually 0 IV attack, which was really nice, because it was obviously able to kind of sit there and just kind of absorb damage, right? If a foul play or something got thrown at it, didn't end up mattering, but it was nice to have an optimized Heatran, and that one also came from Pogo as well. So just a big thank you to everyone who helped me like get the team. Like, it was a very chaotic scramble to get the team. Like, I'm pretty sure like the stress of like getting it last minute actually kind of added some like character to the team for me. Like, it made me become a little bit more attached to the Pokemon I was using, because I was like, I know the struggles that it took to like actually get this team in game. Because like the thing is, right, like with VGC, and like this is the one thing that competitive could really work on, is like access to the game is really hard. Like, you need to spend hundreds of dollars to have like multiple games to be able to get these mons like actually like easily, right? If you want like more than one copy and like you're resetting and everything, right? So it's like really hard to actually catch these Pokemon legit. And it's a lot of time, money investment, right? So it's like it can be really difficult, and like I definitely hope that they add some features to make it a little bit more accessible for people. But also, is this Lechonk chasing me? They're just staring at me. Okay, that's fun. Anyways, but yeah, no, I hope they make it more accessible, right? But yeah, anyways, so yeah, 6 legendary is very hard to get. There might be more of a norm nowadays, honestly, just because like legendaries are so good and they just make up most of the format, right? But yeah, I just have to say thank you to everyone who obviously just helped me get the Pokemon, right? The Urshifu obviously coming from one of Sierra's friends as well. Thank you so much. I have to trade that back as well. I have to trade all these mons back, honestly. But yeah, yeah, it was just a really like, it was really cool because it felt very like connecting with others, as well, like in the journey of like getting the team and everything, especially because it was last minute. So yeah, just super grateful to everyone who like helped me get it. And then yeah, like in terms of the actual Japan story, right? Like I went to Day 1 Worlds, and like during Day 1 Worlds was actually when I was grinding out most of my team, to like have ready for the event, right? But Day 1 Worlds was really cool. Worlds was cool in general. So like now talking about my Worlds rounds themselves, right? It was pretty much like a very stacked day I played, right? Like I played versus some of the best players I think I could have played versus. Like don't get me wrong, like Worlds is always like that, right? So you'll play versus good players all the time, and like that's expected because you're just constantly being paired versus people who made day 2 of the World Championships. Like that's just expected, right? So round 1, my first round pairing is actually versus Alfredo Chen Gonzalez. Now, you might be like, okay, like, cool, whatever. Like, why does that matter? So, first off, he's really good. He's from Australia. He's an Australian player. He finished second, I believe, in the standings. Doesn't, like, regardless, doesn't matter, but he's just very good, right? He is the one who helped me train up my Pokemon. He used up his resources to help me train my Mons, and he knew all of my investments in my Pokemon and everything. So I'm just sitting there and I'm like, bro, are we really gonna play each other like round 1? So like, of course it's like you have to, right? But it was so funny, like the way it worked out. I was like of all the people you could pull. So I ended up winning. It was like a pretty like it was a pretty good set for me. I just still had like matchup. So I was able to kind of just play correctly and just put myself in a good spot, right? And then I played versus Eric Rios. So Eric Rios had just come off of a win on stream, right? So he was feeling pretty good. He just beat an Emilio on stream, right? Wo-Chien went crazy. Terra Poison Wo-Chien came to every single game in that set, and I was just able to use the combination of Thundurus and Wo-Chien to just really like give myself an edge, right? So it was super useful. I was able to do a lot with it. I was very, very happy that like I was able to get utility out of the Wo-Chien. Then I played versus Kengo Harada. It was his first Worlds, but I played versus on stream. That's probably the match I'll like watch over actually next while we're like as I'm going over the team with you guys, because I think there's a lot of good insights in that match, right? But yeah, it was like super, super good. I was able to obviously like play a really good set versus him. He played very well versus me. He made some insane reads. A lot of the Japanese players make really good calls. And then I play versus Kentaro. So if I'm not mistaken, Kentaro was the guy who won Japan Nats last year in 22. So I was already like, oh my god, like I'm playing like, you know, Alfredo, really good Australian player. Then I play versus Eric Rios, arguably like one of, if not the best, like it's between him and Gomez, honestly, for best in Spain, right? I guess you could also argue Casti as well, right? So it's between him, Casti, and like Gomez for like best 3 in Spain. Oh, Torviv too, yeah. Damn, there's so many good Spanish players. Anyways, like whatever, you get it. Like one of the best players in Europe. And then you have Kengo, who's like, even though he's a first, like it's his first time at Worlds, like he's still playing incredibly well. And then you have Kentaro, who's the 22 Japan Nats champion, right? We have a really good set. I'm able to win. Then I play versus Luca Lucignoli. Sorry if I'm murdering your name if you're watching this, but basically, like, I'll be honest, I like clicked way too fast in game 1. I should have won because I taunted the Amoonguss and I switched in Lando instead of Flutter, and I should have just clicked Shadow Ball, right, with Flutter and won the game. I just clicked too fast and like I lost game 1. He also played really well, by the way, like no flack on him. Game 2 I won, and then game 3 I lost because I just didn't respect the Urshifu. It was like the Scarf Rain team that Abdullah used as well to make top 8, just like with slightly different sets. Overall, the set like felt a little frustrating because like I felt like the loss was a bit avoidable because like if I had just not clicked so fast and I had just like taken my time, I would have been able to win. So is life, right? Then I play versus Torviv Victor Medina, which is one of the other best like Spanish players in the world, right? We have a really good set. It's 1-1 going into game 3. Game 3, turn 1, Icicle Crash flinches my Landorus. Essentially, it was like game over from turn 1, right? So yeah, just, you know, what are you gonna do, right? I wasn't like salty. He apologized and he felt bad, but I was like, it's all good. You know what I mean? Like it's Worlds, like it happens. You need to take what you can get, right? And then I played versus Davide Carrere. He finished second at EUIC in I believe 2019, and then he also finished top 8 at Worlds last year. So very solid Italian player. This is the win in, by the way, and it's the same rain team that I played versus that Luca was using. So I felt really good about, you know, obviously understanding the matchup, and I was able to get the match 2-0 and win, right? So then I'm in Top Cut, and I'm like, okay, so like I feel really good about my team. Like it has some solid matchups into the rest of the field. Then I end up pulling Kenji Miura. Now, that's like, okay, like who's Kenji Miura, right? But a really solid Japanese player. Dude, he has Baxcalibur with Terra Fairy and Rocky Helm and Zapdos. If you look at my team, I do not like Baxcalibur with Terra Fairy. Urshifu has to play a mind game versus it with Surging Strikes in close combat. Thundurus gets absolutely destroyed by Crash, and then it can get Glaive Rushed if you Terra it, right? Which means you have to Terra it. And then Landorus also gets destroyed by Crash. Flutter doesn't appreciate Icicle Crash. It does so much damage. Heatran is the only Pokemon that hard walls to backs. He has an Urshifu with Swords Dance. So it's like, oh, like I am actually threatened by this Pokemon like hella, right? So it was really tough because obviously like there was a lot of pressure. And he beats me game 1. I played a little too passive. Game 2 I win. And in game 3 we're playing this like it's a really like drawn out game. So there were 2 big turns that really influenced like how the game played out. So the first time I was like, okay, so I could just basic Wild Bolt attack him or taunt, right? And like basically the basic Wild Bolt attack works if I expect them to make a read, and taunt works if I expect them to make the safe play. I expect them to make the safe play. Taunt doesn't really do anything because of that, and then the Urshifu is able to get a free SD up. If I'd clicked Wild Bolt, the game would have been done right there. Game would have been over, right? Not great, but I'm still in the game. Now, the situation is that he has an Amoonguss on the board, and he has a it's a Moongus and Baxcalibur. Baxcalibur is a little bit under half. It's Terra Fairy. I have Landorus, and I have my Flutter, and my Flutter is going to die to like any attack, right? So except for Ice Shard. So I go for a Dazzling Gleam, and I get to pick between Rock Slide or Stomping Tantrum. I have to make the read. So basically, if he doesn't Rage Powder and calls my double spread move inside Pollen Puffs, I lose the game. If he goes for Rage Powder and he goes for an Icicle Crash, and I go for Gleam and I go for Stomping, I lose. If I go for Rock Slide, I win, because I just Rock Slide again and then the game's over, right? So now I have to make a choice. What do I do? I end up going, because he made the read on the Urshifu SDing in my face, right? On the me taunting the Amoonguss play, right? So I'm like, okay, I am just going to like straight up attack him with Stomping. He goes for a Rage Powder. So now it's pretty scary because I have a Landorus in front of an Amoonguss and a Baxcalibur. The Baxcalibur's just above red in the yellow range. I throw a Rock Slide out, it survives on 1 HP, and it beats me. And I was so devastated that that's how I lost. But with hindsight, right, in the end, it was my own plays that led to me losing. So it's stuff to learn from, right? But definitely was a bit disappointing. However, the fact that I was almost able to beat such a bad matchup for me felt really good. And I feel like if I can just have like this, like I feel like the teams I've been bringing the Worlds are fine. It's just about having the run, right? So it's like this Worlds had a lot different context for me than the last one. The last one I felt very dejected because I got very unlucky. This one I actually felt like, you know what? Like I'm still making mistakes. Like there are still ways that I can be better as a player to like motivate myself to work harder and like eventually have that like world champion run, you know? So even though it's disappointing and I think I could have gone farther, right? I actually would have been against Michael Kelsch, who made finals next, and I felt like my matchup in them was pretty good. You know, I just gotta play well and I can make that run, you know? So all you can do is really just like try your best, work your hardest, you know? I had other friends who had lost in cut as well that, you know, I was there to kind of share in my grief with, and it like made things better. And like I definitely think friends help you get through the tough parts of Pokemon, you know, especially the losing parts, and it's very essential for that, right? But also knowing how to lose on your own and like push through your losses is important. But yeah, so that's how I ended up, like, the whole world's run went and everything, and, like, the whole world story. Hopefully you guys enjoyed more of this casual video. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to review my Wo-Chien video separately. I kind of want to start doing more, like, analysis videos of, like, certain key matches and cool things on like, not stream, but, like, for YouTube. Let me know if you guys would be interested in the content, and let me know if you guys are, you know, if you guys enjoyed this kind of video, and the more, like, casual approach of kind of going over everything while just, like, fooling around in game or just, like, talking. I know it's, like, different than, like, the, you know, nice graphics and everything, but I felt like, too, a good change of pace, and, like, maybe it's something that, like, would allow you guys to connect with me a bit more over this kind of game. Because I really do, I'm passionate about this game, and I could just sit here and talk for hours, honestly. I love Pokemon, and, like, this, I love this kind of vibe, because, like, I can just actually freely talk about Pokemon, and just, like, kind of, like, I don't know, like, word vomit all my thoughts on screen is the right, like, way to say it, but, like, yeah, basically I could just say what, like, I'm feeling, right? But anyways, thank you guys for all the support. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this kind of video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Expect more content, because now I'm back. I got a little sick when I came back from Japan, but now I am mostly recovered, so you should expect more soon. Alright, guys, thank you. Catch you next video. Peace.